All right. Um, Today we're going to be talking animation, specifically in this part, keyframes and just simple camera movement. So the very first thing we're going to do is add a camera. Create, cameras, camera. This will create a wireframe camera that we can move and rotate around like any other object. So we're going to place it over here in a rough position, and that's all we're going to do with it for now. Before we continue, down at the bottom of the screen, let's go over some of our interface. Right here, we have our timeline. Right now it goes from 1 to 240 because I have told it in this box that it needs to be 240 frames. If I wanted something else, you type it in, and then you can drag the slider out and get 1 through 1,000 in this case. So the reason I chose 240 is because we're at 24 frames per second, and I figure 10 seconds of animation is more than enough for the first go. Next, we have the playback controls over here. Once we've animated things, we'll be able to hit play and see what's going on. Here we have our settings. So you're going to go into that, and you're going to confirm that update view down at the bottom is on active. Then hit save. Next, you're going to right-click on the timeline, and you're going to go to playback speed and make sure it's real time. If it's one of these other options, it will just fast forward through your animation, and it'll be very hard to actually see what's going on. All right, so in this scene, I've got just a bunch of randomly stacked cubes. I've got a light source, I've got a floor, and now I've got a camera. So we're gonna go to the panel layout so we can get the different views. We have top, front, and side. Over here we have perspective. For the purposes of this, we don't really care what the perspective of our default camera is. We want to know what the perspective of camera 1 is. So we're going to go panels, perspective, camera 1. So now we can actually see what camera 1 sees. So we'll leave it there for now. We'll take a peek over on the right side of the screen, look at the attributes. Here we'll be able to control all the rotation, scale, translates, all of that. You'll notice in a second that this will turn red as soon as we add a keyframe. It's another way to show that there is a keyframe in place based on the object you have selected. So we are going to have our camera here. We're going to make sure we're on frame 1. We can just click anywhere on the timeline and it will tell us what frame we're on. So click at the beginning, and we want 1. Then we're going to hit the S key. It's going to add a small red line telling us we now have a keyframe. These are going to change red to also indicate that there is a keyframe in place. What that's basically doing is telling the computer to remember the positioning and attributes of whatever object you have selected. In our case, it is the camera. There. So you notice if we move, and then we go to say frame 40, it snaps back to wherever our keyframe was, because we have to actually go to that frame and then start moving. So if we move it, and then we'll rotate so we can see our pile of cubes again. And let's say we make it 90. Maybe now we'll wait to tilt. All right, we hit S, so now we've locked in another one. Go to frame, say 80, and we will keep moving. So we'll rotate, and then we'll lock it in. Go to the next one. Sometimes it can get a little hard to remember where you're actually supposed to be looking with the camera. Let's say that's where we want though. We'll do that. We'll go over here. We'll set our rotation back to 0 so we know what's actually going on. And then let's go back down here. All right, that seems pretty good. And then for 240, let's say we just move back way out and say, all right, So now if we hit play, all right, so we see the camera is moving on the front one, but it's not showing up on any of the other ones. There we go, it was just stuck. All right, so if we wanted a bigger view of that, we can go back to our main perspective view, switch to perspectives. Actually, before we switch that, we can watch the camera moving around if we want, but if we want to see what it sees, go to camera 1. All right, so like I said, not too complicated. It's a very basic animation, but it's a good starting point. So the next thing we'll do is we can stop that. We can go back to frame 1. I want to talk about rendering. Well, I'm not going to require you guys to render for this. It's good to know what goes on when we're rendering. So if we click render view and then we render, remember to render something, you need to have a light source. If you don't, everything will be black. All right, so right now we just rendered the default perspective camera. What we actually want is we want options, render using, no. Here we go. We want to go to render, and then camera 1. All right, so now we're going to be rendering what the camera actually sees. The next thing we need to do is we need to go to settings, and we need to change some things. All right, so in settings, this button right here, all right, we need to change, we might want to change the file format. I just selected PNGs because I know it works. I know my computer is happy with those. You can honestly choose anything you want, TIFFs, EXRs, JPEGs, anything that works for the type of program you're using. The important thing is down here, frame animation extension. So it defaults to name. It'll save a render as, in my case, animation testing. It will only ever do a single individual frame, which is why it says single frame. What we want to do is switch to one of these that has the pound symbol. So here, name.pound.ext, that means it's going to save my file, we'll just use that for simplicity, as animation testing dot whatever number frame it is, dot whatever the extension I chose. So mine would be animation testing 0001.png. And then when it goes to frame 2, 0002, and so on. When you select one of these, you can do a whole batch of renders at once, which will save you a lot of headache, might not save a lot of time, but it will save time. All right. Then we can, the other thing, if you need to change any of the resolution settings, you can do so at the bottom of these options. Hit close. And now again, if we just click this button is just render an individual frame. Since we have 240 frames, that's going to be very tedious to do one at a time. If you guys remember, I think the Spider-Man video said they did like 1,000 scenes or 1,000 frames for every scene or minute. I forget exactly what it was, but it adds up very, very, very fast. So what we can do is click render sequence. So this is going to go through one at a time. Right now it's rendering frame 1. As soon as this finishes, it'll save it and start rendering frame 2. Each of these takes, let's see, it looks like it took about 10 seconds or so. 2 reasons I'm not going to have you guys do this. 1, it's time consuming. 2, some of your computers bogged down and froze with smoothing. I have a feeling it's going to do a very similar thing with rendering. If you want to try, you're more than welcome to, but I'm not going to require it right now. The other thing is, so I'll pull up the file or the folder that everything is saving into. So before we get to this, at the top of Maya in this little bar, you see right here it says C, users, Joey, desktop, yada, yada, yada. That is the exact location of the file. Also in that is going to be a folder that has, so if we go to the 3D review where this is, you'll see animation testing. Then there's an images folder. And here's where it's saving all of these images. It's going to save 240 different files. Once I have all 240 images, I'm going to need to put them into video form. Maya only renders images. It does not render movies or animations. So it's a very similar process to the stop motion that we did. You're going to take all your individual images and you're going to put them into a video editing program and compile them into a video. Each operating system has different programs that come with them that you could possibly use. There's other free options as well. So if it's something you want to look into, I will try and help you out the best I can, but it kind of comes down to what computer you're using, what operating system, what kind of specs you have, what you're looking to do, all that. So again, in all that time we've been talking, we're on frame 10 out of 240. So you can see it takes a long time. I mean, my computer is far from the best. It's quite old, but I'd be willing to guess it's probably a lot more powerful than, say, like a current MacBook Air or something like that. Those types of computers, they just weren't built for rendering. Mine wasn't either. Mine was built for video games, but it does have a decent video card, a decent processor, so it's able to process these files fairly quickly. Movie studios or anyone who's doing a lot of rendering are going to have massive computers, multiple video cards, top-end processors, just to cut down on the time it takes to do this. And you also have to remember, we're rendering a scene with like 9 boxes, and that's it. Think about any animated movie. There's loads of things going on in each individual scene. You can imagine it takes quite a while to render any one given frame, let alone an entire full-length hour-and-a-half movie. So as a reminder for today's assignment, you're going to be using your hammer models. You're going to be applying the camera movement animation using keyframes, and then you're going to send me your Maya file after you've added that in. If you have questions, I will be on either Meet or email. If you want to try actually rendering and stitching it into a movie just so you can see how it works, feel free. Again, I'll answer any questions you have as best as I can. And I will talk to you guys soon. Have fun.